right to me.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. The next item, which is not on the agenda, I just became a grandfather at
Yay!
I'd share that with you. That's first,
What's her name?
Mary Mae Montgomery.
Mary May.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Names.
congratulations.
Thank you. Okay, status of the trust funding.
So right now, I'll let Jennifer jump in. She knows more, but right now the trust has been funded. So funds have been transferred from the city into investment account, Raymond James, with the money, right?
Yes, they
There you
are.
go. Confirmation.
They are sitting with Raymond James. All but 200,000 is invested with short-term maturities to mature June, July, and August as the Board of Trustees is going through their RFP process for an OCIO. That way you can earn a little bit of interest while going through that process. The 200,000 is so that we can transfer to cash. We're actually in the process of setting up that cash account with Truist for operations and payment of expenses as those invoices start coming in and as operations get going for the board.
So things are underway.
COIO.
OCIO is the outside chief investment officer. So it's hiring someone that's going to.
Somebody, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, there are firms out there that specialize in these types of trusts, and so.
Right, so you're doing proposals for interview people. They are.
We're going to, next meeting, we'll interview people who will help us. It's a pretty complicated process, so we'll interview a firm and hire a firm that will help us actually write the RFP, because they'll come in like this from the outside CIO people, and then eventually wade through those and hire an outside CIO. Yeah.
And for the actual dollar amount that was transferred, it was $41,095,000, I believe.
Wish that it ended up in my account by mistake.
Yeah. Just for a day, right?
Okay, next item, review of current city strategic partner.
Turn that over to Angela. She handles our strategic partnerships right now for the city.
Okay, my name's Angela Jackson. My title is Executive Director of Community Services. So what I do is Parks and Recreation, Golf, City TV, and then Strategic Partnerships. I've been with the city about 22 years, and the past 4 or so have been in this role. And I tell you that just as a little bit of background for kind of where we are now. And let me preface that by saying I'm really excited with where we're going, because this has been a transitional process. So I want to share with you like where we are now without the expectation. I don't want you to think that I think that it's perfect now, because it's not. And we're going to go in amazing directions with this opportunity. So historically, the city had something that was called outside agencies in the budget. So basically, that was when Murfreesboro was a small town, and there were opportunities to fund different nonprofits with the city's through the city's regular operating budget as a part of that process. That was called outside agency funding. As the city of Murfreesboro grew, the process did not grow. And when my position was created and when Mr. Tyndall became city manager and did some structuring as a part of that, that was one of the things that City Council asked to look at the time, is how can we make that process have more structure and basically make more sense, right? So looking at that and just taking a list of all of these different nonprofits that at various points City Council had determined it was appropriate to fund, through that process and taking a look at that. One of the first things that we did, I did site visits with all of them. There were some that I felt like I knew a lot about, that I learned more when I went to a site visit. There were several I had never heard of. And so that was very helpful. Then what we began doing is kind of putting them in categories. We met with city council, we met with a lot of city staff, just to kind of go through what some basic goals and objectives and to try to put some structure to it. And where we landed was grouping these agencies in ways where they made sense to what the city was and what the city does. So, for example, our Parks and Recreation Department has direct relationships with some of these nonprofits, with Discovery Center because of the wetlands, with Oaklands because of Oaklands Park, with Meals on Wheels because it's in St. Clair Senior Center. So several agencies that we already have relationships. What we began doing through a transitional process was funding them in the city's budget through the Parks and Recreation Department with review through the Parks and Recreation Director and staff. Agencies that had relationships with the police department, Child Advocacy Center, the Domestic Violence Shelter, they were already working with the police department, and those are now funded through the police department budget. The Community Development Department, those of you who are familiar with that, that is a city department separate from Community Services that administers federal dollars and does a lot of program administration for agencies that assist with things related to homelessness, related to food insecurities, several other things along that nature. So a lot of these agencies were also receiving funding and being reviewed and going through processes with our Community Development Department as a part of the block grants and some of those pieces. So basically what you'll see, I passed out a packet, and this is just kind of some recent communications that we've had and that have been published, and it's probably more than you want to read. I know some people like to dig into that, but you have it if you would like to. Kind of as what I did, the first couple of pages are just what was the narrative from our current city budget that sort of explains what it is, what our goals are, what we're doing. Next is our most recent council communication where we talked about what we were doing, and then it has the funding schedule of which agencies received how much money last year and what that looks like. And then finally, I put what the applicants receive, what the nonprofits do for their instructions for what they submit, and a copy of the application that they go through. So where we are in looking at what the agency does, what its alignment is to city services and expectations, what benchmarks they have set for themselves and how they are meeting those benchmarks, and kind of what that looks like from the applicant's perspective. When we look at where we have changed in the past few years for what the city is doing, it has all been pretty flat. We have taken, with a few exceptions, a lot of the same organizations at a lot of the same funding levels, and carried that through as a part of that transition. So rather than stepping in and just sort of ripping the rug real quick, right, we looked at what began as a 3-year transition. Before there was talk of the Community Investment Trust at all, we were beginning that transition towards making it something that was more like a grant process and less like an expectation of I got $10,000 for the past 10 years and I'll get the same for the next 10, right? So we had begun that change. When this opportunity was coming on the line, we started talking to the agencies about that. I've met with them. I had thought it was going to be this year that we were making that transition. So they have been told for this next fiscal year that we're not going to be ready to award, and so we're going to basically have one more current carryover piece of funding through the city's operating budget. And so they are expecting that, and they should be getting ready to participate in the process that you all create, which I'm sure there are going to be agencies, because these are good, strong nonprofits here in Murfreesboro that will be applicants, right? There is not the expectation that you will do this and only this, or that it comes with an obligation. They know that they are going to be participating in a competitive process. And I'll say this, in Rutherford County, there are about 1,000 registered nonprofits. That includes churches, that includes Nonprofit Party of One. But when you look at that piece of just here in this county, how many nonprofits, some of them that are not on this list do great work and might be potential organizations that you choose to fund. And it's something that I'm excited to see us be able to take it to the next level and what that looks like. As far as any individual agencies or the process itself, I could talk for days on this. I'll spare you all so Mr. Montgomery can go see that grandbaby instead of listening to me drone on. I am happy to answer any questions that you have now. I'm also happy to meet with you individually and kind of go through and talk to you about what we have done in the past, kind of where we are, what that looks like. I think one of the careful balances that we all want to hit, if you have been working on the nonprofit side, if you have been the grant applicant before, you don't want to create this burdensome process where the nonprofit is spending all of their time filling out an application and meeting your standards and looking at your metrics, and none of the time actually focused on the mission that you're trying to fund. But you do want to have some accountability to the process. Let me pause there, see what kind of questions you have about where we came from and where we are now before we talk about more where we're going.
Me again. When I look at the government services piece of this, are we expected that will not be under our purview,
Great
correct?
question, and I should have made that part of the original spiel. That will not. So the expectation of those on this list is that the city's operating budget will keep those governmental services, will continue to fund agencies like the library, Paul's, and those other governmental services that we work with. That is not to say that like Friends of the Library couldn't come and make an application separate and apart, but not the expectation to carry on. We'll keep those in the operating budget as a part of that process. Thank you. That's a terrific point.
Will there be others, like Center for the Arts, since that's a city?
So Center for the Arts is one. Let me kind of go through that list and point that out also. So we did 3 main categories of strategic partners. The governmental services, and that makes sense. The strategic operating partners, those are the ones that we found it possible to directly align with for review with a city department. When you look at Parks and Recreation, when you look at police, when you look at schools, which is not technically a city department, but still associated with the city, those made sense. Those that are in that category called strategic funding partners, that's kind of the miscellaneous, right? Those are the ones, arts and culture did not really fit there, even though we do some arts programming through the Parks and Recreation Department, and arts are certainly a part of our community. We don't have a city department that made sense with, and then Beasley was kind of in there in that other organization that did not directly align through those. So they would be a terrific applicant, I think. I mean, the city does have various relationships and cooperative efforts with some of these other agencies, and I think that's part of that review as well. One of the things that we're working to do with those is to formalize some of those relationships outside of these processes, and have been working towards that. I'll give you a couple of examples. Some of the nonprofits are in city-owned buildings and have leases. Main Street Murfreesboro, the building that they are in belongs to the city. We Care Daycare is a nonprofit that is in a building that belongs to the city. You will see Child Advocacy Center on that lease. Up until recently, they were in a old fire hall. They are now in a new facility that they are a new to them facility that they are renting as a part of that. But up until recently, they were one of those as well.
So,
The difference really between governmental services and the rest of them is that governmental services are something that if it wasn't being done by one of these agencies, we'd probably pick up all or part of that. So if the library didn't exist, the city of Murfreesboro would probably fund a library somewhere. So that's why governmental services were taken out and why the city would remain the funder for that type of activity. Everything else is more of a charitable activity that comes in that is an ancillary function that benefits the community, but it wouldn't be something that the city would normally do.
so other than the governmental services category and the strategic operating partners category and the leases, are there others that we would not be funding, that the city's going to be funding?
I would say if there is something like that, then it would be separate from this process. If we have like a professional services agreement with an agency to do a thing, the same way that the city, if we hire an electrician, we pay an electrician. If we hire a nonprofit to do a particular activity or to work with us on a particular project, and there is a funding arrangement as a part of that, then it's separate from this. The community development department and administering those funds, I think, would fit that category, but I don't know of. Is there something specific you're looking for?
Just thinking about the $40,000 to Main Street.
So with that, the relationship that we have with Main Street, that is one of the ones, Craig, that we have talked about what that looks like and digging into that. So that one might be a good exception as a part of that, where that could potentially remain with the city's operating budget because of how we interact with them for a partnership agreement. Yes.
Yeah, so we'd have to look at some of that. There was a good question asked before the meeting, I won't say who, but
You're looking at me.
that was brought up as to whether the committee has to fund these existing ones and what is the commitment going forward? And the answer is there really isn't a commitment going forward. You can choose any of these. Some of these we'll have agreements with that we worked over a long period of time, and if the committee doesn't, fund them, that we may fund some of those. Some of these have, for example, in-kind amounts that we are now assessing for providing them with a building. That would be a funding source that they would request from the committee that we'd have to work through. So there will be there undoubtedly will be some overlap as we transition to the committee granting funds from the city granting funds, and we'll just have to work through that probably for a year or two.
I'm just curious, and you probably have it in here, but
Sure.
how much is this budget a year? How much do you give away a year?
If you take away the governmental services, because that kind of skews the number because the library is so big, right? 280-ish,
Yeah.
but I want to grab a calculator before I go all the way in on that, Jennifer.
right.
Somewhere around that mark. Do you have a calculator? Are we close? I'm just kidding. You don't have to check that.
Well, I'll do it in his
But
head.
it's something around 280,000.
Are there any charitable services that the city's funding so heavily that they couldn't exist without you?
Yeah.
That's a good question in that piece, like what is the impact? One of the questions you see on the application, if you flip to that back page, actually the very last page, lists the funding amount that was received from the city last year and what percentage of that amount was from your total annual budget. I mean, that's something that I'd be happy to share with you for any and all of the agencies. For most, it is a small percentage. I think where nonprofits are now, if there were any nonprofit leaders in the the room, they would tell you how desperate they are for every dollar, right? And I don't want to devalue that concept, but I think that's one of the things that we're looking at, right? What makes a nonprofit a sustainable organization that is doing good work and functioning well, and how can we support that? And what does that support look like, right? But that very question was why we didn't come in 4 years ago and say, everything changes this year. Like last year you got X, this year you get 0, or because we're giving it to someone else or taking it away, right? Like it has been that slow transition of please know when you're planning your next year's budget, this is where we are in this process, right? As the funds for the Community Investment Trust grow, and there are more and more opportunities, determining how those are distributed, of course, is the primary task of this body. What does that look like as far as the benchmarks that they have met, the goals that they have achieved as a part of that? I think that part is key in looking at what the impact is to the organization, for sure. That's one of the pieces that they need to explain.
And one of the assessments that you want to make with organizations coming in is if they're running their entire organization on an annual grant, there's not a lot of stability there because the grant can change at any point in time. And so do you put a lot of money towards something that could disappear, on one decision after the next year? I'm going to be careful of that.
One point to Collier's question about other agencies that are receiving funding, and I think you touched on it through community development, but for example, Habitat for Humanity is our participant and maybe part of that continuum of care in the community development group, but they receive some funds on a case-by-case application basis, I think, through there. Yes, no?
Not through the strategic partnership piece, but through the community
CDBG.
development piece,
Right.
through the CDGB funding, and the city has also partnered with them for some special projects. I'm going to look to Sam on that for Habitat, correct?
Yeah, so for the last 3 to 4 years, we've supported Habitat with first-time homebuyer grants of about $10,000 per applicant. Those are mostly Legacy Point homes, and we probably have, on the average, done 5 to 8 per year, depending on the capacity of Habitat to identify owners and actually build the homes. We've talked about a lot of other projects for the last few years, but we haven't worked into an actual funding scenario that would come through community development. But we're constantly entertaining opportunities with them.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
I know that these agencies come to you and they have these huge requests, because we've been on the other side of that. And then, what they get is, who helps you, who's on your committee to decide that now?
So what that looks like, that's the beauty of the strategic operating piece. Those agencies that work directly with the police department, it is the police chief and whoever he designates that knows. So for example, the relationship that they have with the domestic violence shelter and the detectives that are in and out there, where they are, how that's going and how that functions, right? So those that are aligned with Parks and Rec, it is with the Parks and Rec director and whatever designee that is a part of that, and looking, like basically the answer is it depends, right? There is not currently this kind of committee, and it's not approached as a grant in that same way, right? Ultimately, it's city council making funding decisions.
Okay.
So it goes back to them. Yeah.
All right, so this will be my last question. Because I've been to Chrissy Houston and
Yes.
asked for money. Chrissy Houston has really tough guidelines, and you have a huge application process that
Yes.
goes on and on and on, like you were talking about earlier. But they require you to have as much money as you're asking for. Do you have the same stipulations that if they're asking for, let's say, that they have been matched and that they have had to be in business for how many years? Like 3 years?
There is not that same kind of guideline that was stipulated with that piece. Those kind of rules and guidelines is something that with that next piece, and that's next on the agenda, is talking about the grant-making software, and Karen's going to walk you through that, through those components. But I think setting those things, like, for example, having existed for 5 years, like we don't want to do a startup nonprofit. We want to support something that's going. If that's a decision that you make, that's a very common feature in a lot of different grant applications, but not all of them. Some grant applications want a startup. I recognize a new problem and I have a new solution in that piece. I think that's part of the guidelines. I think also, as we move into the software conversation, that is one of the limitations of our current piece in that structure. I mean, it's a fillable form from Adobe in an Excel spreadsheet right now. It is not a open application where you're funneling hundreds of applications with big requests and small requests. We were starting from a base of the organizations had already been receiving funding for a number of years and had that council approval in the past with that piece, rather than a shiny new process. So some of those guidelines, like Christy Houston, for example, is doing a lot of building campaigns, right? The sticks and bricks, like that kind of, like larger amounts. When you look at the actual gives of this, I mean, a $2,500 piece, a $10,000. I mean, I'm not degrading what $2,500 can mean, but compared to, do you also have $2,500? That balance isn't as hard as saying, like, I'm going to build a $10 million building. Well, okay, well, we're not going to give you more than 5. Show me that you have skin in the game, if you'll pardon the expression.
Yeah, but they do require, and I don't think that's a bad thing, to make sure you've been in business and that you've proven your success. I don't, for $1,000 or, $100,000. It's good to know.
I agree.
Anything else?
The sum of everything on this list minus governmental services comes to $340,500. The projections that were distributed at last meeting for 2024 are $278,963. So I think that kind of shows us the challenge that's going to hit us very quickly.
And I think the difference with that, Craig, is that child advocacy piece. We did a specific increase that is a part of their building change.
Yeah, we needed to move them out of it.
Bring it to $250,000.
Which is in there close. But there are continued expectations with that organization. There are also continued opportunities with the city's operating budget when we have specific organizations and specific needs and expectations to meet those in other ways. But you're right in the sense of where kind of that crunch is going to come in, of what you would like to do versus the resources that you have available at any given time.
Will there be an absolute cutoff date, or will the city weave some of its funds in with our, let's say it's 280 and the budget's 340. Let's just use that number, even though it's not right. Will the city, is this a drop dead cutoff date where we go from city funds to the contributions, or?
I don't know the answer to that question. Perhaps not. It depends. Good answer for almost anything. It'll depend on, I think, what the city's budget looks like, what we're talking about, what we are funding and what happens. And, there may be some transitional period where we need to do some additional funding. So, and it's anticipated right now that the next round of funding will be funded out of the FY24 budget. So that's funding until June of 24. This committee's goal should be to make the recommendation by February 15th for funding for the year after June of 24, so FY25, and somewhere in there, because you don't always put the funds out for these all at once. They go out over a period of time. So do we need to build something in there? You know, we'll be watching that as we go to see what the effect and how much is available from the trust. So it's a hard question to answer right now, but it is possible that the city will need to step up and make a little transition funding in there. I'll mention the only, one other restriction that the committee will have is the legal restriction on the use of city funds for nonprofit, non-governmental actions, and that is it needs to be a year-round operation. So they need to be in the community and operating all year. Now, they could have a program that is a short-term program, but the organization itself is operating over the entire year. So it's not a one-time event. You know, it can't be used just for that, and then the organization goes away and nothing happens. So that's one limitation that we should abide by from a legal standpoint.
And those state restrictions are pretty specific. You can't say, oh, we plan year-round for our one-time festival. Like it is truly a year-round agency.
Be operating your mission year-round, yeah.
Thank you, Angela, for that. That's good information.
Thank you. And let me reiterate, if I can, if any of you want to reach out individually, I'm happy to dig into any detail, show you applicants. It's all open record in that piece of what that looks like.
That looks like that covered item 4 too, which you just went over. So, Karen, sample grant making software.
Hi, I'm Karen Member, and I'm the grant manager for the city of Hillsborough. I work under Angela. And our role with the city is to serve all the departments in researching and applying for federal grant opportunities. So I run the gamut from, foundation grants to federal grants. So have a lot of experience in using a lot of different application portals, as well as in a previous job, I served as a program officer in California, so I was on the other side of this with the grant-making part, and have a little bit of experience with kind of helping a foundation make grants and give out money. So with that, I was tasked with kind of providing you with some general information to give you guys a starting point as you're thinking about and establishing your grant-making procedures. So one part of that decision is choosing a software that can help you in that process. And so talking about kind of why that's important. So there's a lot of benefits and things that are good to utilize technology versus a paper format, or kind of how Angela had set up the strategic partnership. When you're looking at the administrative side of managing this process, you definitely want to look at a way that helps save time, provides a consistent process, can administer the entire grant process electronically from the submission of applications all the way to evaluating outcomes and tracking those things that the applicants said they were going to do. Remote access to information, so as a committee, it's not where you necessarily have to come together, that you guys can look at that information remotely wherever you're at and have the time to review the applications and make those decisions. A paperless process, so we're not taking up additional administrative space and trying to manage a lot of paper and keep up with that. It's all contained on the cloud electronically. And it does provide an easier management process and a way to show how the funds that you're providing in the community are making impact. So you can track that to see how you want to continue in the direction of your funding choices. So as a user, what are some of the things that you want to consider in selecting a software company? And if you start with the setup, so this would be the behind-the-scenes work administratively to go in and set up a program, an application. You really want it to be an intuitive process. Whoever's doing that, it's easy to set up. You can easily navigate it, provides eligibility screens. So this is those gatekeeper questions that you can ask the applicant on the front end to keep them from going through the whole process. So some of the things you talked about, are you providing services year-round? Are you providing services, within the city limits? Those are questions that you can put into the system beforehand, which then would knock out potential applicants that don't meet your requirements. And really important is having good customer service. So as you're going through this process, and if you have any problems, they're there and available and provide good tech support throughout the process. From the end users, such as me as a grant writer going into the system, I look at systems that are easy to use, that have a process that, don't cause me to pull my hair out. There's a lot of nonprofits who might have multiple users who help contribute towards the application process. So really, it's nice to be able to have that functionality to allow different people within the organization to access it. The ability to save and come back to it, it's really critical for me as a grant writer to be able to start an application. I may not have the bandwidth to sit down and complete it all in one setting. So to be able to go in and out of the application process is really a nice feature. Being able to intuitively navigate through it, and the ability to preview the questions. I do a lot of my writing outside of the application process, so knowing what the questions are ahead of time, I can set myself up to have that information outside and then go in and kind of do a copy-paste type thing, and then be able to have a draft that I can forward to somebody else to get the final okay and a review on. And then the award management process, which would be your role in evaluating, reviewing, tracking, and identifying outcomes and reporting. Any questions? So we did some investigating and kind of asked around, and so these are some of the different providers that were recommended or that we have. I've had experiences with. One of the first companies that comes highly recommended is Foundant Technologies. This is the software company that actually the Christy Houston Foundation uses, and so she was able to meet with us and kind of give us some background preview of what that looks like on their end. And she said their customer service is amazing. They have really good training that helped them to use the software, and they were readily available to help answer any questions as they were going through and customizing their application process. The pricing over there is just a broad pricing range that when we reached out to Fondant to say what would this cost, they kind of have theirs based on different access categories, so whatever features that you want is kind of how they have that priced. You'll be able to get a more concrete pricing range, at a point when you're ready to kind of be a little bit more serious about what you want and in discussions about choosing one. I actually applied for a grant through NEEF, and I went back and looked at their application, and they do use, that was a Foundant process that I used. So I just did some screenshots based on our application just to kind of show you some of the really nice features that you might want to consider. The ability to kind of have different question formats, so you can have them, choose a box, being able to limit the number of characters or words in a response. So, keeping things really succinct and tight, so you're not getting applications that are 20 pages worth of boring whatever, that they get straight to the point of what you're looking for. And then they have the ability that you can reiterate the instructions within the application process, so it's right there in front of them. So there's no question about what your expectations are, and be able to easily navigate through that. Another popular company is WizHive. Again, they provided a broad base of pricing range, just to give you an idea. I don't know, what their implementation cost includes. I'm assuming that would be some technical assistance and some training involved with that as well. I couldn't find any applications that I've used for WizHive. I know I have. And for some reason, I want to think that maybe the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee might use WizHive, but I'm not for sure on that. Another recommendation, or another popular grant-making software is Blackbaud. But the recommendation for Blackbaud was that they're very pricey, and they're really more beneficial if you have a large grant-making process. So maybe some larger foundations who have multiple grant-making seasons, or they accept a large amount of applications. But for probably what you guys are looking at, this may be a little bit bigger and more wieldly than what you actually need. Another one is Flux, and the reason I included that one is because the Tennessee Arts Commission uses that one, and that one's also one that I have experience as an end user on, and one that I don't like and don't recommend. It's not as user-friendly as some of the others, and it wasn't one that I was highly impressed with.
What was the name of that one?
Flux.
Flux.
FLUXX. So those are all the ones that, kind of giving you a broad-based overview.
The fondant one that you did, I mean, how many pages was that? Or how long did it take you to fill that out?
It just depends. Foundation grants typically aren't very lengthy, and they pretty much follow the same structure. There's a small section that provides organizational background. There might be one or two sections that are, community need, and then identify program. Word limits usually are around like 500, maybe 1,000 if they're really stretching it. So that one wasn't hugely complicated.
So you're the expert in the room. Would you go with the first one?
That one I have had a lot of positive experiences with, and found it is, I'm also a part of a grant professional organization, which is a nationwide group of grant writers, and they are actually they attend the conferences and are part of that, and they offer a lot of really good online training webinars just for grant writers. So they're very involved in the grant community, both on the grant making side and the grant writing side. And my interactions with them has always been very positive, and they're very professional. And then from Ann Davis's recommendations, her direct interaction was very positive and favorable as well.
Karen, do you know, with the Christy Houston Foundation, you mentioned there was like 4 different pricing range for Founded. Would you have any way of knowing which one they're on?
I don't know which ones.
I can say Ms. Davis has been very helpful. That one would be, we could find out.
So I'm surprised about how expensive this is.
Yeah, and I think, part of that, you're going to have, your initial startup cost is going to be a little bit more expensive just because of the, training and background, but then, the annual.
Maintenance costs.
Yeah, licensing.
Maintenance costs. Well, we buy a lot of software. It's not really expensive based on a lot of the stuff we buy. Once you start talking about network and servers and enterprise software and things like that, it goes up fast, price-wise.
Yeah, and I would offset that with time and effort cost. So, what you're putting into the software, and if that's, alleviating a lot of staffing time and effort and your time and effort, it balances out.
It's a good point. I mean, that's how it's justified on the cost. And they, if they're maintaining it in the cloud, then they have a lot of back-end maintenance costs that they hire, and IT professionals are not cheap. Now, this is an expense that doesn't come out of the committee's portion. This is an expense that falls to the administrative expenses for the board.
The 200,000 of cash.
The 200, well, yeah, that's what we started with. But yes, out of that operating costs of.
To get started.
Yeah.
So you'll make a recommendation, the board will approve it, and then they pay for it out of the operating costs that comes out of the
Pays for
entire
that.
5%. So the amount that flows to you, the 15% of the.
Well, everything that we do goes to them anyway, so.
Okay, so if they didn't pay this, they'd spend us more money.
That's right.
Okay, can't argue that.
And the reason we would use a software company, a package like this, would be for ease of doing what we do. Would that be the only reason? Is there some legal reasons? Okay.
No, it's really the administrative part of it, to make sure that, you guys have the time and the information to review it in an easy manner, and then from an administrative standpoint and the back end of what the city's running, that we can administer it pretty inexpensively.
We could review these at home, and when we come into this committee meeting, we're going to already kind of have an idea who we're thinking, instead of sitting here for hours mulling over it.
Yeah, and this particular one has the ability to put in some metric forms that allow you to score applications, so you can enter in scores. So you can set up a set of specific questions so that everybody's scoring and looking at the applications in the same way, and then it will average those and give you, a review report. So you're not going in with everybody's, kind of independent questions. You can come in with a way to say, okay, this application scored this versus this application scoring this. This one came in higher upon everybody's independent review. So it does give you some standard ways to measure and evaluate your grants, the grant applications. So,
But that scoring is public record, right? Because we're under the Sunshine Law.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be public record.
You're looking like, really?
I mean, I guess they would have to do a open records request to get those.
Yeah, we don't publish it out there, but certainly anybody that
Right, but
want it can request it.
they need to be able to be accessed.
Yeah, and these companies, because they work with, public records apply to a lot of the nonprofits as well, so.
But there is a way to create an anonymous or an aggregate report, so there would be a way to provide the information without revealing information on who scored what or comments made within the review system.
Are you saying that we would score it individually?
And you could, if that's.
No, I think that's a good idea.
If that was if you decided that was how you wanted to evaluate and make decisions for the application.
I think when Ms. Davis was showing us the Christy Houston process for that, a couple of things that really stood out for me that made me jealous of, like where I currently am with the 30 versus what you're going to be facing there. One was just the ease of the document storage. If you want to attach the 990, if you want to link to the GuideStar, if what you're looking at in your criteria, if you've got something in mind, like even if the kind of the sort by features, and then having all of that in one place to be able to say, all right, now I'm ready to really start narrowing these down, and these are the criteria. It made it very visible on the screen in front of you, and I thought that was terrific. I think it will be very valuable also for your second year. Like, so the first year that you're looking and you're saying, these are the decisions I made, to be able to follow their reporting pieces. This is what they said they were going to do. This is what they said that they accomplished, and this is why they're back asking for more. To have all of that piece right there in front of you through this software looked really, really terrific.
And it provides automated communication opportunities, so you could set it up so that it would automatically send out an email to, either awards or rejects or reminders for reports and those type things.
So the purpose today is kind of an introduction, just an overview. I mean, there's not really a decision that needs to be made today. I think building the process is going to be important because, as you see, there's different levels of pricing on there. And these companies are generally pretty good about listening to the process and what fits. I mean, they don't want to oversell you because that doesn't do any good. That's a problem for them. So they'll find the right one to fit and the right price point for you, and then we can go from there. But yeah, it's something to mull over and think about. You don't have to decide today.
And if there's any other companies that you think about or are aware of, I'm happy to do some more research.
Can I ask you a question about the found-it pricing that was on the screen? If you can bring that up.
Yeah.
I was a little confused. I think it was the next page.
Pull that back up.
Slide rule.
There we go. Yes, it's like at the very top, it says $10,500 for basic license, which is a 2-year agreement.
Yeah, so the license part is $8,500, and then the one-time training fee is $2,000, so that's the $10,500.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And we would probably need to decide about when to move forward with a software company. I mean, is it your thoughts by July, by August?
I think, developing a bit of the process on what you'd want to see come in and giving them some parameters, and then talking to the software people, and a lot of times they'll do a demo online, where we can set it up here and they can run a demo and see, and they'll show you different things. You may say, well, we didn't think of that, but we want to put that in our process, and they'll put it in, and then we'll find what package would work the best, and then go from there. I think, focusing on the ones that really would offer the type of things we want at the price point we'd want to be at. Obviously found it, and maybe one other we can research and find that is one, Karen, unrecommended one, so we don't have to worry about that, maybe. And have them do a demo and see what you're comfortable with.
I thought
it's a 2-year agreement. If it doesn't work, then we'll go to something else.
I thought Blackbaud was primarily on the other end of it. I used it when I was a fundraiser. And our database was kept, and that's how we...
Yeah. So they do have different components. So a lot of these companies do kind of that donor segment piece as well as the grant-making piece.
I see.
Especially for foundations who are doing donor management piece as well as grant making. But all we would need would be just that grant making piece. We don't need any donor management.
Anything else? Any other business?
I just have one clarification, and I think you mentioned it, but I just want to make sure. So our strategic partners clearly know that there's a sea change happening.
Yes.
And how funding is going to be. So they're fully aware of that.
They have been told multiple times.
Okay.
I think one of the things that we did last year to really, really drive that home. Because, like also, like I have certain contacts, like if I'm talking to the executive director who refers to me to their outreach person, like there are a lot of different, and then there's turnover in the organization. One of the things that we did to really drive that home, if you look on the application and look at the very last question, not only have I told you, but I want you to tell me what you're going to do about it, was the intent. Karen helped write that question. I thought it was a really good one. How do you anticipate your organization preparing for this change is one of the questions. And I think some of the answers that we received back to that were very thoughtful. And I think a lot of the nonprofits in this community are paying close attention to this process and where the opportunities are going to bring with that. But if anyone is surprised, it's not because they haven't been told, but because change is hard. But we will continue to do that and to share with them what they need to do to prepare for this, like to make sure that they know well in advance what this application is going to look like. Those that are on a calendar year, fiscal year piece, to not just assume and plug in that same $10,000 that you've got from the city every single year, but instead to consider that. I mean, hopefully what they're doing is saying, man, our organization has it going on and we are ready, and we are going to have a really strong application because we are believing these things and meeting our benchmarks, right? I think change is hard, for sure.
So will we have our own website? Will it go through the city? How will the promotion of this process be? These 1,000 nonprofits, how are they going to learn about how to apply, when to apply? What about all that?
I think from a city standpoint, first of all, looking at the resources that we have available to us through our communications department, through how we normally advertise opportunities across the board is going to be important. Using, if we wanted to do a city TV feature, if we wanted to provide specific information on the city's website and share, if we want to have that social media piece, taking advantage, those of you who are familiar with Charity Tracker, I mean, that's something that a lot of our nonprofits will be sure to put an ad in on Charity Tracker. The other organization that are other funders, United Way puts together a kind of an informal funders organization. So organizations such as Christy Houston or the Richard Siegel Foundation or the Charity Circle Group, like a lot of the organizations that are out there paying attention to local nonprofits, how can we share the word and make sure that information is out there? I mean, marketing, branding, information sharing is that ongoing challenge, but I think using those resources and we can make those available through the city to do those pieces. And then also, of course, I've got records of anyone that's ever asked before, and we'll start there, right? And that's a pretty good list in itself.
So when do you think that we would be letting people apply for grants for next year?
That's a great question. So with that cycle and with how that fits to where the funding is available, and kind of working back from that piece, I think having that specific window for the application, to know that it's coming, to know when the application is due, to know when the award will make and when the actual check will be cut. I mean, all of that's going to set that pace, and it's going to set the decisions for how quick we get into the software and get it loaded up and setting this criteria, and that's where this community works backwards from. I think, was it February 1st, Craig, that we had looked? There were a couple of or Jennifer, the places that we had on the calendar for distribution.
The recommendation needs to go to the Board of Trustees by February 15th. So February 1st is a good goal, and then it gives a little leeway for the committee to make its recommendation. So if we were to back that up, if the committee was accepting applications, say sometime in the early fall, and working through those, always have to be careful of that December timeframe because everything is too busy to get much done. and then have January where the committee is really making decisions, so then the recommendation can go over. That would be a good timetable.
Did I miss this? Well, how long, once the word gets out, for them to apply?
If I can refer to Karen.
Typical application windows are 30 days. I probably wouldn't go any less than that. I probably wouldn't go any more than that. I think most nonprofits are used to kind of a 30-day window opportunity. So if you opened it up the 1st of September with a September 30th closing date would be sufficient. And then you could do all your pre-award.
And how much leeway should we give them to, like,
0.
no, as far as telling them this September, from September 1 to September 30? Should we let them know in July?
Yeah, I think you can.
September 1st, September
If
30th?
they miss the deadline.
No. I mean, we don't want to send out a notice on September 1st saying, hey, you have 30 days to get your stuff in.
Yeah, I would say, 2 to 4 weeks.
You have to work through Labor Day.
Our strategic partners
The way you
have
operate.
30 year-end deadlines.
I'm sorry.
How many of our strategic partners have September 30 year-end deadlines?
I would say the majority are either on a calendar year or a same as us with that July 1 piece. Probably less than 5 would be my guess with that.
So we're like saying maybe our goal should be the month of September for people to submit applications?
Yeah. You're kind of hitting a funky time period for nonprofits that have, have July 1st through
Right.
June 30th budget. So you're going to probably hit nonprofits that are going to have to straddle their funding over maybe 2 budget cycles. So, but I think in this time frame with having that, I think September 1st would be a.
So when would it have been ideal?
Typically, if a grant funding organization can issue their funding in alignment with, like a July 1st, like we're going to award the funds July 1st, and but there are also some organizations that have a January through December calendar. So, I deal with a July 1st calendar, so I'm always looking for, that's always more helpful from that perspective. But I think the reality is you guys you have to work within what your time frame is, and they will adjust.
Goes to council and it goes back. Once it's done there, then the board can distribute.
Any other business?
I don't think they have to hit fiscal year.
You have anything, Angela?
I don't.
I would think we need to set another meeting because we need to get this software deal kind of
Yeah.
figured out pretty,
That's all part of it being part of.
seems to me, because we still got to review, get it all
We've got to
implicated,
get the software, and then we've got to do the promotion, and then we kick in.
and we have to get the
We gotta-
criteria. for
And
the
if
software.
we do
gotta
every
come up
2
with all
months,
that.
it'll be September, and
So
summer's
it's
kind of a
gonna
bad
come
time.
on quick. So, I'm all for meeting in, obviously, the next month, picking a date, but will we have the software, to look at, or?
What if we go and get a couple of, Found It, probably one, and then I forget the name of the other one, and see when they're available to do demos. And then we can get a couple dates out of them and then circulate a couple dates and see.
In May.
In May, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
And then pick that as our next meeting date, but
exactly.
instead of setting it right now, because we have to work around
It's
them.
not the last weekend.
The last week?
Memorial Day.
Oh, Memorial Day, yeah, we'll skip Memorial.
If we did a virtual review so that everyone can sit and kind of play around with it alone as a workshop piece without any decision being made, still no?
We don't have a lawyer here, but they did stop allowing for those, sorry.
Kind of thought you
Have
were a
discussion
lawyer.
on items that will be voted on later on.
What?
You cannot have discussion without having in-person meetings, items that will be voted on later on.
We couldn't,
You cannot have a virtual meeting.
and that's what that would be. So
All right, let's do
everybody bring
that.
your laptops and come sit here together.
All that bar dues I paid, I guess I should get them back.
You can have a virtual presenter, but the committee members cannot be virtual.
Yeah.
Oh, we would have to be in here. and-
We have to be in person.
Yeah, it shows up over.
Your laptop all sitting individually.
Well, this thing will
No
pump it
screen.
in, and it'll be a screen here.
Let them go each individually before they came to the workshop.
I like Tuesdays, though.
You can do that, Sam.
They'd be willing.
We could let them do their homework, right? We could do,
You can set up one-on-ones with them and do one-on-one demos with them if,
which could be something, normally the software companies would give us a link or something like that that we could share with this group, and you could do one, on your own.
Yeah.
And
If they have automated, yeah, but I thought, if they wanted to do a presentation and have a discussion amongst the group and then answer group questions, we should probably light this up and let them do it here. But yeah,
you could do that as the follow-up, Craig, isn't it?
Yeah.
That have an opportunity to look at it individually,
yeah, if they have it set up to play with the software. Yeah, that's a good idea.
preview them at the.
Just send us some examples of
Yeah.
a couple of
We'll
these.
see if they have, and then we can send a link, and then they can go in and see what the software is, and then they can do a presentation. Most of them will do, a presentation wirelessly when they
So-
sell it.
We'll have to have a meeting in May.
Yeah, so we'll find 2 or 3 dates in May, and then circulate those and see what works for the best for the majority.
And Tuesdays work for most people. So can we just do Tuesday circulations?
We work every day, so Tuesday's fine.
I do too.
30 o'clock hour's good.
Tuesdays at 3 o'clock are always.
This,
Can we set something up as a goal, so while we're here to come across a mutual date?
Right.
I mean, it's so much easier when we're sitting here at a table. I can remember the past experience we had trying to schedule the initial
What's the
meeting.
23rd for everybody?
Well, I leave on sabbatical on the 22nd, so I'm out for 3 months. So if we could do something before the,
can we do it the week before that? Because then that's Memorial Day, getting into all that.
It has to be a minimum of 3 weeks from today for us to get it advertised.
By the 16th? Oh, so that's 3 weeks.
The
That'd be
16th
1,
probably
2.
is not favorable for me.
Yeah, I'm available the 2nd.
Can you
9th.
drop it down to 16th, 23rd? What we talked about?
Do you leave on the
1, 2,
22nd?
3, 4, 23rd.
Not the 23rd.
You're out the 23rd?
Chicago, yeah. Out of town.
Okay, so we're down 2 on the 23rd.
I'm out on the 23rd as well.
You're out too, Ronnie?
And this, so
We're out
you
3
need
on
3
the
weeks, you said?
we can advertise in the Post.
Yeah, we can advertise in the Post, or we can advertise online, and ideally, it's 3 weeks, but there's workarounds. So if we need to go a little early, we'll figure it out.
I'm just going to throw this out and raise or lower your hand. 18th, Thursday the 18th, 3 to 5.
I can do it.
I can do it.
Thursday, May.
No.
Okay, got 1 no.
No.
2
Wide
no's.
open.
Okay, I'll throw that out.
That's because you got one little crit.
It's just tough, man. I've got 3 trips in a row.
You got 3
Are we-
trips in a row.
Well, I got a kid graduating college and
No, right.
We just push it to June 1st.
I mean, is
Around it, does everybody be at home in June?
Yes,
I
June
mean, I don't
6th,
see
3 to 5.
Week.
John will not be
But
here.
I'm going to be gone, so
I'm got, what about Wednesday, is a Wednesday okay?
can we do it before John leaves? Is there any date
He leaves on
within the 3-week time frame that, doesn't it make sense for us to do this as a try to?
Yes.
On this, picking this up, or what's
1, 2,
Friday the
3.
19th?
No.
Yes.
I can.
Friday the 19th.
What about Wednesday, the 10th?
I cannot do
Not enough
Wednesdays.
time to advertise.
Can't do Wednesdays.
I can't do that Wednesday.
17th.
Monday,
She can't do Wednesday, never mind.
Do Wednesdays.
Monday, the 15th.
I can do it.
Mondays are good for me.
That's not 3 weeks. I don't know how that works for y'all.
We'll work it out.
If I just miss it, I'm just going to.
Are you doing a commission meeting?
Carl, I have no idea where I'm.
We can go to PD.
Regional
It's all right.
finals.
Right, I get it.
I mean, I would think, I don't know.
Oh, the airport, oh, yeah. The airport's closed. What do you need an airport
We won't
commissioner?
close this. Yeah. We can meet on the runway.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, that's right.
We are scheduled for a
Commission meeting?
the
Yeah.
15th.
Yeah, the 15th, this room is used. We could try the PD at, we've never done, I know this room works for presentations, two-way communications. I don't
When do you leave, Wade?
know if PD is set up that way.
I'm toast after the 17th.
Can we come earlier in the 15th? Just,
I thought we had to have 3 weeks.
I thought they were saying that you can't get, the 15th doesn't work.
We can advertise a different way than, we can make it work.
Friday the 12th?
I'm available Friday, the 12th.
Who couldn't make the 15th?
I can make the 12th.
Oh, it was the city was in here.
I can't make
The city
the
was in
12th,
here.
Yeah.
The 15th works for all of us except for this room. Surely there's another place.
But can we just make the meeting earlier?
In the morning?
And, yeah, on the 15th and like early, like in the morning?
6, 5?
Kind of early.
Why not Friday the 19th?
I can't.
Good. Did we discuss the 18th?
If we did, I mean, airport commission's at 4:30, so
15 in the
we
morning.
do
I
2:30,
wanted- I can't
3
do
or
the
the
morning.
morning.
But can we do like
1
a
o'clock on the
Yeah.
15th?
Yeah.
Do that, and then it'd definitely be done by
Oh, yeah.
1 o'clock on the 15th?
On the 15th?
Ronnie, you here?
That's a target to get we'll see what the
1 p.m.
software people do.
May 15th, Monday. 1 PM. Everybody good with that?
Yeah, I've got, I can come back for it, yeah.
And the goal is to send the link out so we can check out the software, and then on that 15th, we're going to make a decision. Is that the deal?
I think part of it would be having the company representative come or.
So we're gonna do May
virtually on the
15th.
15th as well.
Okay, all right.
May 15th at 1 o'clock.
If we can get a link, if they have, Sam's idea is good, if they have it set up where you can go in and test out their software and demo it, then ahead of time, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much time do you want each company to present? 15, 20 minutes?
What do you
They
think?
should be able to get through that, and then questions after that.
Allow some time for questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't give them too long. They'll go on. They're marketing people.
All right, if there's nothing else, meeting adjourned.